The man who helped the Mavericks get to the NBA Finals by my determination, but is also slowing down the stars. From Locked On Mavs, it is Nick Angstadt. How's it going, man?
Oh, it feels good, gentlemen. I helped the Mavericks as much as I could. We let it ride all the way to the finals.
See? There you go.
Look at you trying to shift blame for you causing the Stars to lose.
That's true.
Okay.
You jerk.
You know what? I'm going to ask you the same question.
It's on you.
It's a very
Don't fall into his trap, Nick.
Do not fall into the
simple question that somehow has got corrupted into this bad thing. The Mavericks win the NBA title. The Stars win the NHL title. To facilitate that, the Rangers have to eat loss after loss after loss. That's a deal you take, right?
They already won the championship last year.
Mm-hmm.
You fell into his trap.
You did.
Ladies and gentlemen.
What about 2 championships?
Yeah, the correct answer.
My
is
scenario,
all the
we get
teams
3.
win.
Yeah, but my scenario is the way where we win games and championships.
I know this is the station for the Rangers, but after the championship parade, don't they need a minute to get that together if they're going to win another one?
No.
Just run it back. Back at it. The only way
Exactly.
you get better is iteration.
Exactly.
Ladies and gentlemen, sports genius Nick Angstadt with us right here on 105.3 The Fan. Now, obviously, I know we're having a lot of fun. It's easy to have a lot of fun right now. One of the things that we were talking about earlier is Game 1 of the Timberwolves series. You get, I think, 19 points, 20 rebounds combined from Gafford and Lively. And that felt like something that was pretty sustainable. And then last night, 20 points, 17 rebounds combined from the combination. As much as people talk about Kyrie and Luka, for good reason, Gafford and Lively. Is that your second line item of how we made it to the finals?
They're the backbone. I mean, you think about when the Mavs were here in the Western Conference Finals in 2022, the starting center was Dwight Powell. Like,
God
love me some Dwight Powell as a person, as a veteran leader and all that, but to have a front court of Dwight, Maxey was playing a lot. They would play some small ball to now go to Lively and Gafford. The way that they can, catch lob passes from anywhere, the way that they can defend. I was talking with a couple Timberwolves people, and they were like, man, we don't have one big that can catch lobs the way that yours do. And I was like, you have
That's true.
Towns and Gobert, two defensive player of the year 4 times and a multiple-time all-star in Towns. And they're like, man,
Gobert's not flying through the air to do anything.
they're like, man, wish we had what you guys had. And I was like, man, as Mavs fans, we dreamed of these days when you have one competent center. Now you have 2 that you can play 48 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we had Boban sitting on the bench for most of that run there. So yeah, that's a different vibe. Did you expect Luka to come out the way that he did though? Because that threw me for a huge loop. He was already in the zone by the time he stepped on the court.
We hadn't had a Luka game like that the whole playoffs, right? We just hadn't had the one where he comes out and he goes, hey guys, you know what? I'm the best player here. I'm the one that's going to come out and dominate this quarter. I'm the one that's going to set the tone. And some of it had been because of injury. We hadn't really seen it. He still hasn't had a 40-point game in the playoffs. And he has the most 40-point games of any player under the age of 22 in the playoffs ever. It's insane that he still hasn't done that yet. And he may not do it against the Celtics. They're a great defense. But he hadn't had one of those games. He comes out, and then he has 20 in the first quarter and then has 16 the rest of the way, which is not a lot for him. Kyrie kind of was the one that took it over the finish line afterwards, but Luka was locked in. And I think he didn't want to come back to Dallas and play one more. That knee, he's like, hey, man, can I just have a day off of this knee and have some extra time?
And now you get a week off. And
huge.
Speaking of injuries, I have to admit I was disproportionately angry at Naz Reid for catching Derek Lively in the neck. I don't care if it looked like a basketball player or not.
I think it's fine.
Okay,
I don't think it is either.
Okay, I was like, he did that on purpose.
It's a frustration foul. It's one of those where your team is down, you're not feeling good about anything, nothing's going right for your team, and you just kind of flail your arm. And it just happened to be the worst possible player, the worst possible place that he could have hit him. Just karate chopped the back of his head. How often does somebody get karate chopped in the back of the head on a foul? Never. And it just so happened to be the one guy that had a neck sprain. Insane.
Now, shout out to folks in the Twitch chat that are shouting out this Raccoon Squad.
That's right.
But I did want to circle back to, as this series wraps up, I mean, we're getting to a place, and I think you had some questions. Kevin's had some questions. A lot of us has had questions about Jason Kidd. How are you feeling about him now? Because Jared Dudley put out a tweet last night where he called him one of the greatest minds that we've ever seen in basketball. And, I mean, that's some high praise. You compare that and you juxtapose that with some of the ways in which people were asking for this man to be fired maybe 3 months ago. I don't know. Maybe
did you do that?
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, where do you stand?
So did the person who usually sits in that chair.
There you go.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on Jason Kidd at this moment, headed into an NBA Finals?
Yeah, there's that point in the middle of March where they lose 5 out of 6 games. All the problems that had come up before were looking like the same thing. Just looked like the Mavs were falling back into all their old habits, all the stuff that had them miss the entire postseason. And it's such a tight, contested standings in the West that if they slipped any farther, they were going to fall out of the playoffs again. And so you go, maybe they need another voice. And so that's where I got to that point. And obviously now, since then, they've become a completely different team. And Kidd has specifically mentioned that date, March 7th, when they turned it all around. They become the number 1 defense in the NBA. And like now he's unassailable. I just saw the stat today. He has 21 playoff wins as a Mavericks head coach. Carlisle has like 33 and Avery Johnson has 23.
Yeah.
It's like he is third in Mavericks.
And he's the first to get him to multiple Western Conference finals.
And isn't he the coaching series leader? He's won the most playoff series at this point in
Yes.
Mavs history.
He's had Luka, which is really good for him for sure. But, I mean, he's unassailable at this point. He's done a great job. He's gotten these guys together. And I think an underrated thing that I've really appreciated about Jason Kidd, that is the reason why the Mavericks were never, even though I and some people were like, oh, maybe they should move on. The reason why they never were going to is because they got buy-in from Luka and Kyrie. That those two guys, after the season they had last year, they missed the entire postseason. 10 teams in the West make the postseason, and they were not one of them with a top 5 player. Kyrie had just come over in a trade, was going to have to sign some kind of extension or re-sign with them, and they got them both to buy back in and now to play defense the way that they are. Like, that's a feat in and of itself.
How do you guys feel about the coaching matchup against Missoula? Obviously, the Celtics have been knocking on the door for a while and have rolled through a couple of coaches to do so. What do you feel about that coaching matchup?
I think Joe Mazzulla and I are like the same age.
Sure.
Which is like, that's what I first think about with him.
35.
Yeah, it's insane to hear how young he is. But I think that Jason Kidd can be the best coach in this series, and I don't think that we're saying that a lot of times coming into series. I mean, Ty Lue, we don't think we were saying that. Mark Daigneault, he's done a great job, coach of the year. Chris Finch, he was the second row coach. I don't know if we were saying Jason Kidd could be the better coach in that matchup, but he was. And so now, like, I think the Mavs could have the best coach in the series, and there's been a lot of questions about Mazzulla. He's had some amazing talent throughout his time, but Celtics had a great season.
Yeah, I think one of the funny things about this coaching matchup is it feels like two coaches that have done a lot to set up the style of play and allowed their players to exist within that, as opposed to like kind of being more of what we would consider a micromanaging coach that really wants to establish things. And that shows up particularly in Dallas because you go from Rick Carlisle, who very much wanted to establish how the game flowed all the way through, where how many times has Jason Kidd said Luka Doncic is the game plan? Like those guys,
he's the system.
He's the system. They will determine kind of how this goes. But I mean, I do want to see like the chess match of knowing when to push certain buttons, because I have been fascinated with Jason Kidd and when he has decided to push buttons. The Jaden Hardy one is a big one that you see. The ways in which I thought, okay, well now the rotation has to slim down. And not necessarily. Exum would be inputted in various points. Josh Green would be inputted into the rotation at various points.
And the right points.
Exactly. And so, like, those are the things that I want to see compared to another team in Boston that has a rotation that they can widen out a decent amount or they can narrow. And so I think seeing who hits the right buttons will also be really interesting in this one.
Kind of curious about y'all's thoughts on what Boston had to go through throughout the playoffs, though, because each series they were missing their star player at some point in that series. So it feels like, again, we said the Mavs road has not been easy. It felt like there was an easier road, an easier path for Boston along the way.
Okay, so Nick, I go back and forth on this, and I think there's evidence to support both sides. There's evidence to certainly support, I went through the gauntlet. I'm ready for this. But if I'm Boston, I'm like, I went through an easy run, and I got 10 days off before the finals, so KP can be back, one would think. And so I'm kind of conflicted about, which is the better path once you get there.
It's almost the rest versus rust debate again in the playoffs. They had their first round series. I think they had 5 days off after their first round series. I think they had another 5 days off, and now they're gonna have 10 days off between series. I mean, there's a lot of time in between there, and it helps them get Porzingis back. We think. I mean,
who the hell knows?
I mean, everybody.
We saw that.
you take a drink every time somebody said Porzingis' first healthy offseason in 2021, and now we're doing it again for Porzingis. But yeah, I think they get that. They get a lot of rest. They don't have a ton of like old guys except for Al Horford, really, and so you get rest for him. That's helpful. But I mean, the Mavs have the injury to Lively, Luka's knee, Maxi's shoulder. They get some time off, and I think that's helpful for them. But I don't know. I don't think the Celtics have been tested at all. Like to your point earlier about they went through a Heat team without Jimmy Butler. They went through a Pacers team that didn't have Tyrese Halliburton for a couple games. They swept them, so he didn't play in 50% of the games. And then the Cavs team didn't have Mitchell for a little bit and didn't have Jared Allen, their starting center. It's like, what have you guys even done at this point? And I think that there are some that are saying, and I kind of agree with this, that it may be like the Mavs up 2-0 by the time the Celtics really realize, we got to play like playoff basketball now. We have to wake up and actually defend.
Yeah. That definitely could be the case. I think Mazzulla's going to have his guys ready, but I see what you're saying there, man. Once you get on that court, everything changes for sure, and that could be a huge factor. I do think that Mazzulla's coaching style is very tough, hard-nosed, kind of not necessarily like a Thibodeau kind of guy. That dude's like extreme on that end, but his coaching style, the way he sees it, the way he prepares those guys is kind of in that vein.
Do you guys know the thing about Mazzulla with this movie, The Town?
No.
Yes.
Have you seen quintessential Boston movie.
There's a story that came out about him, I think it was last year. He watches that movie 10 times a week.
Yes.
That feels like a lot of time.
I mean, it's a good movie. I don't know if any movie is that good. It's a good movie.
Yeah. I'm also curious, too, is we know that fan bases, Minnesota, Kevin, you said it had a whole Reddit page saying, don't piss off Luka in this game.
Yes, they said, don't boo him. Just sit there while he has the ball.
You know where that's going to work? You know where that's going to work? In Boston.
From Boston.
Try to tell those guys not to do something.
Exactly.
Maybe they'll cut him some slack because he's white. Are we supposed to pretend like that's not a historically very well-known racist town?
Particularly when it comes to sports.
Yeah,
Yes.
I didn't say anything.
Well
about
documented.
that.
You know who they're definitely not going to cut slack?
Oh, my God. They're going to boo the crap out of
Dwight
Kyrie.
Powell.
Kyrie Irving.
Oh, no.
That was going to be my question.
Former
Sorry,
Celtic
Reggie.
great Dwight Powell.
How much do you care about those kind of subplots in terms of Kyrie returns to Boston? Tatum and Brown probably might still have a grudge against Kyrie. The Luka KP conundrum. It does feel like if you want to ignore it all, I'm like, these are two damn good basketball teams. I get it. But if you want to get absorbed by the drama, it feels like it's there.
Yeah, Locked On Mavericks Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube. As that person that hosts that show daily, I'm very interested in those things. I'm extremely interested in all those things. But I think there is something to it. If you start to look at the matchups, especially with the Porzingis story, like let's start with that one. You start looking at, okay, if you have Derek Jones Jr. and PJ Washington on the two wings, Tatum and Brown, that means Luka or Kyrie are probably going to guard Porzingis, and I think it's going to be Luka. We could have Luka guarding Porzingis in this series to start because they'll probably do the thing where they have Gafford or Lively like roaming and not on one of the other guards. Like that's probably what they're going to do to start. And so then all of a sudden now that matchup matters. So we're talking about why it means so much, why Porzingis may have a little extra mustard on a post-up or something, and Luka may have a little extra, FU on his side of it. And so I think that stuff does matter. The Kyrie stuff, we'll see. I mean, we've seen him struggle against some really good defenders in the OKC series, and so maybe the Celtics is a similar version of that. He's going against Derek White, who's an amazing defender, and Drew Holiday is too. But, Kyrie's going to be motivated, and he was motivated in Game 1 against the Timberwolves, and you saw what he did.
You just mentioned a player right there, Derek White, who might not have as much like name recognition for, let's just say if you don't follow the Celtics or you follow mostly the Mavericks. What kind of challenges does Derek White present? Because a lot of people are like, that's the dude. That's the spark right there.
Yeah, he's the glue that holds a lot of that together. He's an amazing defender. He can kind of do a little bit of everything on offense. He can hit a three. He can get his own shot a little bit here and there. He's also like weirdly an incredible rim defender as a guard. So like you try to drive on him and you get to the post, and maybe this is something Luka will deal with, but he'll get to the post and all of a sudden he blocks your shot because you didn't realize that he can defend the rim really well. So him and Drew Holiday together, like it's the reason why didn't Brad Stevens win the Executive of the Year this year. It's because he brings those guys in, and all of a sudden you have this amazing defensive backcourt between the two of them.
And I think one of the things that I found interesting as I've started thinking about this series when it comes to Derek White is that he by himself does all those things, but he also is illustrative of one of the things that I think Boston has to their benefit, which is at any given time, they have four guys that can initiate the offense.
That's a good point.
And so they play a 5-out style of basketball, 5 guys that can shoot, they can play on the perimeter. And I'm interested in seeing what that does for the Mavericks because in theory, that's kind of counter to what the Mavericks do defensively. They're trying to shrink the floor. They're trying to make sure you can't get in. But if you're playing 5 out and you can't just go, we're going to keep this guy off the basketball or keep him from initiating, we could swing it over there and let that other guy initiate. I'm interested in like what you guys kind of think might happen there defensively with that matchup versus Boston.
Well, and it's kind of funny because we talked about 2 months ago about how the Mavs with the new bigs and everything would match up against a 5-out team. And now obviously you're going to go up against a very prominent version of that.
Yeah, in the Thunder series, they kind of had that 5-out style with Chet too. But they were able to put, PJ on Chet, have one of their big men roaming and not guard a Lou Dort or not guard a Getty. And the Celtics don't really have that. Like, you're not guarding Drew Holiday, who's one of the best corner shooters corner 3 shooters in the league this year, or Derek White, or, God forbid, you're not guarding Horford or Porzingis or somebody like that. And so that's going to be a different issue. And it's going to be a big series for Maxi Kleber. The fact that he's back and they has a couple games under his belt now, that's going to be big for them. But they also still need to lean into their identity. And their identity has been these big guys that can play and that can catch lobs and all the stuff that we talked about, them being the backbone. So it's an interesting conundrum, and hopefully Jason Kidd is the better coach and figures that one out.
You talked about that part of having the big guy roam in that defense, but also those big guys have the ability to contest on the three-point shot. And that's what we saw in Oklahoma City. A lot of was those contested shots became misses because I guess Oklahoma City just couldn't figure it out. But it is going to have to be fast, to get to these guys in Boston. But that is one of those abilities. It's not like you have Shaq, who's like, I can't move beyond this. These guys, Derek Lively and Gafford, they definitely do get out there and put a hand up in it.
The price for the series is set at about 2-1 in favor of Boston. That feels, I know they won a ton of regular season games. This feels like it's been destined to be their title for a long time, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't feel like it's that lopsided of a series to me.
Yeah, because we haven't really seen the Celtics tested, right? I mean, we haven't seen them really get, pushed at all, really. And they've lost a couple of games. They should have swept all those series. But they lost a game to Miami when they hit a bunch of threes. They lost a game to the Cavs. It's they haven't really been tested yet, and it feels like the Mavericks have gone through this gauntlet of Clippers, even though they were without Kawhi Leonard for a couple games, and then the two of the best teams in the West. I mean, they were young teams, sure, but the Mavs have been tested, and the reason why it doesn't feel that different is the Mavs are going to have the best player in the series. That's the big equalizer of everything. There could be all these different things and matchups and all this. Luka comes out and does what he did against the Timberwolves last night. It's a different, it's a completely different series than what the Celtics have faced so far.
Yeah. I did want to get into this, and this is a little bit less like X's and O's, but kind of steps back. And I think it might have been you that I was talking to before Game 4 about this, and someone on the 203 happens to be in that same vein. Dwight Powell, as you mentioned, obviously not in the rotation in the same way, but he has an opportunity to be possibly like a Brian Cardinal type player if he were able to.
Look at you.
If he were
Mike's
to be able to
hate this.
That's absolutely, and that's why I'm doing it. To be able to have that legendary status, if he was possible or able to come into the series and maybe make a notable play. Do you think he has the capability and really could become to this fan base like Brian Cardinal was, or do you think that his status is so cemented that it couldn't even shift into that place?
We did talk about this before Game 4 because we were watching Dwight Powell warm up, and he's just so goofy in some of the stuff that he does and his interactions with fans and things like that. Before Game 2 in Minnesota, I was sitting there in my seat and I watched him take off fake jewelry and hand it to the Mavs social media manager. Just take off all this stuff. Literally for 2 whole minutes, sat and started removing all this stuff. And I just looked at him and I was talking to you and Reggie, and I said, he should be a fan favorite. He should be a guy that we look at and go, man, that's Dwight Powell, who always puts it all out there, who is a big chemistry, camaraderie guy, vet, all that kind of stuff. And yet we look at him as this pariah at times. He was the embodiment of the Mavs' problem of not having any bigs for so long. And maybe he will come back in this series and have a moment, and then he can redeem himself. Because in the finals, we've seen with the Brian Cardinal example, you can become a legend in the finals. You come in and do a couple things, and the fan base will remember you forever, and it wipes out everything else that you did before that. Now, there may be some players that couldn't do that, like a Rondo or a Derek Fisher or a Lamar Odom or whoever, but...
Is Rondo still trying to say that it wasn't him the whole time?
Oh, my God, he
All
is.
right, that's a different story for a different
I was there.
time.
I was there at that Raptors game, Rondo. I saw you walk out.
Yeah, I do contend that that if Dwight Powell draws a charge that just sets up at the right moment, everything changes for him. It's just that one play, and they win. If they lose, it's not going to happen. But if they win, it changes everything for him.
The problem is if he's playing,
something terrible happened.
something bad has happened.
Hey, he played 3 minutes last night. I mean, he got his 3 minutes in.
I was saying,
so.
something good could happen. They could just completely blow out the Celtics, and then he's playing.
There you
He
go.
just all of a sudden finds springs that he hasn't ever had and just puts down a dunk.
I would love Mike talking about how Dwight Powell helped facilitate this title.
He gets a Calvin Booth type dunk.
Would he be like super excited, or would he be saying it through gritted teeth?
The second one.
Okay, very
Definitely the second one.